wonderful workshop. I apologize that I won't be talking about blood pressure. I have worked on blood pressure variability, and I'll be happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk about that privately. I did have the thought that we should invite Peter Rothwell to a meeting where we talk about all the wonderful work that's come out of the statistical flaws in his paper. So I'm going to talk about variability in aging. I'm going to be talking on a relatively general way, and my work is motivated actually more by ideas from theoretical demography than directly from problems in data. And of course, intra-individual variability is very much connected to inter-individual variability. And I want to say a little bit about that. So some definitions of aging it started by saying, well, a fundamental feature of aging is that it's universal. And certainly across species, it's clear that's clearly not the case. There clearly are species that either don't age at all or barely age. Here are some mortality plots. So humans, dogs, and mice seem to have relatively similar patterns of mortality with age. But so lapwings, so a bird species and many bird species show very different patterns, so more like a constant hazard rate with age. So also there can be huge variation based on individual or environmental circumstances. So there you see on the right, so mortality rates in the Netherlands for males born in the Hunger year of 1945 and born in 1946. So very different mortality rates and a different, somewhat different age pattern. Here are mortality rates for, so you see for rats under two different treatment regimens, you see a similar aging pattern, but under dietary restriction, you see a very different aging pattern, okay, or rate of change with age. So just I want to say a little bit about, people seem to tend to have the idea that chronic disease is something that is a modern plague. So looking at Union Army Civil War volunteers in the US, they found huge levels of arthritis, heart disease, and cancer at early ages. 16% of recruits under age 20 were rejected on medical grounds. 25% of those under 20 to 25, of those 20 to 25, and nearly half of those in their 30s. So their great-grandsons lived on average 8 years long after reaching adulthood, but the Civil War generation spent more years with debilitating illness, and the average age of onset of arthritis was 11 years earlier for the earlier cohort, and heart disease was 10 years earlier, chronic respiratory disease 11 years earlier. So there have been huge changes in how aging manifests itself in populations. Right, so also I'm going to rush through this so that I have time for the later material, but just to say that dementia incidence has been becoming later also in recent years. So we can say that individuals of the same calendar age differ in their expression of age-typical characteristics, and these variations seem to be correlated with each other. And so that has led people to think that it might make sense to think that calendar age isn't the best way of describing aging, but that there is something more inherent that is, of course, highly progressive with calendar age that we might call biological age. And it also seems to be the case that that predicting the future of someone's aging is connected to their current the aging they've experienced up to now, which suggests there's a long time spatial temporal correlation in whatever biological age is, and this seems to make it very important to understand biological aging if we want to better understand what the aging process is. So, biological age. So it's a theoretical construct. It's supposed to represent the progression of senescence in a single individual. Now, there's a fundamental question about aging. What is aging? Is it multiple progressive processes in distinct body systems, but which are not linked to each other? Or is it just one damn thing after another, which is sort of called the wear and tear theory, just things break down just because they're being used? Or is there a deterministic process that drives deterioration throughout the body, which happens more or less identically in all individuals, or according to an individual program that may vary? Or is it a stationary process that reverts over time to a deterministic trend? Or is it a single progressive process with significant cumulative stochasticity that drives deterioration in different physiological systems? So these are all possibilities. There are people who subscribe to any one of these ideas. And it's only really in case number 5 that biological age would be a useful concept. Okay, it's only if there's something accumulating that in a way that is more essentially random or differs between individuals that biological age is useful. But if that is true, then the dynamics are fundamental to understanding aging, and it can help us improve prediction of future medical needs and improve targeting of drugs for age-related conditions, and improve testing of drugs that are supposed to delay aging. So biological age, whatever it is, exists on multiple time scales. Okay, there's oh, it's my watch. All right, I hope we don't get an unpleasant surprise. Yeah. I didn't know it could do that. Right. So there are processes with short-term correlations. There are things which happen and then possibly leave no residue. Okay, so there's a change in physiological state, like injuries that then heal, and so on. There are things with cumulative random jumps. Early life infections may bring you to a worse state, which then just continues on, or some cardiovascular events that lead to injury. There might be a random starting point to aging, and there might be a random slope. There might be genetic variants that cause people to age at different rates. So these could be represented by different stochastic processes and with different kinds of correlation structures. And I think about it this way because in demography world, there is a lot of work that tries to represent aging in terms of a hidden stochastic process, but with relatively little thought about what the nature is of the kind of implied correlation structure within that stochastic process. So biological age should be a process that is increasing on average, It should have cumulative stochasticity, and differences in biological age should be associated with age-related deleterious changes. And so how should we estimate this thing, whatever it is? If we're thinking in terms of forensics or archaeology, right, you find a skeleton, you want to know how old it is, then you want to measure some things and try to estimate calendar age from it. If we're thinking in terms of medicine, then we're trying to figure out what measurements, perhaps including calendar age, best predict future survival or other health outcomes. And for aging studies, we are interested in estimating some combination of, using some combination of observations to usefully predict the future trajectory of multiple aging phenomena. Now, many traditional methods of biological age estimation, even when they're used for applications 2 and 3, they're actually often doing 1, and they're rarely actually doing what I'm calling number 3. Okay, so I'm going to skip over talking about methods that have been used so far, although it's interesting, the first actual attempt to estimate something like biological age from biomarkers was done in a study that was to monitor aging in survivors of the nuclear bombing in Hiroshima, to see whether the people seemed to be aging faster due to radiation exposure. So I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes now talking about a method that I've been working on, which is a variation of the notion of dynamic time warping. So the idea being that you think of aging, biological age, as a time transform that better aligns the events that happen in individuals' lives, or the physiological measurements, biomarkers, or events, including health events and mortality, with each other. Okay, and so what you want to do is, right, if you think of x1 of t and x2 of t to be to be two trajectories, two health trajectories, and we have some difference between them, then we want to minimize the difference between the trajectories accumulated over their lives, plus a penalty, some kind of smoothness. And now we can also think of comparing a single trajectory to a distribution of trajectories. And so what we're thinking about doing is trying to find time changes that will best align each individual trajectory to the distribution of the rest of the population, up to a penalty for smoothness. So we want it to be relatively smooth, but to bring individuals into line with each other. Okay, now challenges is a highly non-convex optimization problem, and there's a bit of a challenge in how to incorporate events into this framework. So we've developed an approach to fit it with sequential Monte Carlo. All right, I won't go into details of how we do it, except to point out that you can impose the penalty instead of having to make a penalized optimization. Instead, you can impose an appropriate prior that will effectively function as a penalty. Right, so basically, the smoother your prior, that effectively works as a penalty for not being smooth. And so you can tune this to various theories of aging, and then estimate for each individual what their biological age trajectory is. Okay, and then produce a posterior distribution telling you, based on these data, what the range of possibilities for this individual's trajectory is. Okay, so that's that's basically it. We have, I wouldn't, it's not really a package yet, but it is available. If anyone wants to play around with it, I'm happy to give access. Please just contact me. And it just allows very flexible choice of, of background model, kinds of data you want to put into it, and it's relatively efficient in then giving posterior samples. So yeah, so that's basically it. So thank you very much.